So right now, as you can tell, we've already highlighted a few perspectives this morning, but there are some differences in opinion about what we should be prioritizing, from a least cost approach that makes energy more affordable to a more aggressive strategy to reach zero carbon emissions, either through greater use of renewable energy sources, greater investments in advanced nuclear, and well, everything around and in between. So our next session will help us better understand North Carolina's energy policy and governance before diving into multiple perspectives on the best way to meet our energy goals as a state. And of course, we want to know what your priorities are. So it's time for another polling question. As the next session starts, you'll receive an app notification to complete another question that you can either answer immediately or wait until you've heard more from our next set of speakers. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage the host of the show, Tying It Together, Tim Boyum, and our next panel on shaping North Carolina's energy future.
Well, good morning, everybody. By the way, don't forget the poll. You can vote on it. You should get the notification here, and we'll share some of those results later in this. We'll do more about introducing the panel here shortly, but I do want to start with, I still want to call you Senator McKissick. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Do you keep those titles?
Yeah, indefinitely, in perpetuity. Once a senator, always a senator.
Well, he is also, by the way, a commissioner of the North Carolina Utilities Commission, a group of folks obviously heavily involved with this. Can you briefly tell us how energy policy is crafted in North Carolina, who has the authority, et cetera?
The Utilities Commission has that authority, but there was also enabling authority. It comes from the General Assembly. For example, in House Bill 951, it set carbon reduction targets in North Carolina. They didn't tell us how to accomplish those carbon reduction targets, but they said, you need to get a 70% reduction from 2005 standards from electric generating facilities by 2030, used by reasonable means, and likewise get to carbon neutrality by 2050. So the Utilities Commission will be charged with the responsibility of figuring out what the electric generation mix should be optimally to accomplish those types of goals that are stated in statutorily in legislation.
Well, you mentioned it there, HB 951. It's the bill number that everyone knows, the interaction of the carbon plan, key pieces of the policy. In late fall 2024, the NCUC released the most recent carbon plan. Give the audience a high-level overview of what that plan is and major modifications or amendments that the most updated version is.
Sure. I mean, we've passed our first carbon plan in 2022, and we've combined what we call our carbon plan with our integrated resources plan. So we passed the subsequent plan in 2024. Essentially, we sit there and try to establish how we're going to get about accomplishing those carbon reduction targets. We're closing down about 8,600 megawatts of coal generating facilities in North Carolina because they contribute the greatest amount of carbon in the environment. We are now looking at how do we get to the targets which have been established. Basically, at this point in time, we looked at the electric generation mix that we have, which includes nuclear. It includes solar as well. It includes natural gas and hydro. So how do we come up with that optimal mix to accomplish what we need to do? It's a lot of work, it's a lot of detail, it takes a lot of deliberations to do so. We have proceedings where you have not just, say, Duke coming before us, but a host of interveners that have a vested interest in making certain that we have adequate energy in this state. And one of the things that we saw when we passed the last carbon plan in 2024, between the time that the initial application was submitted, and that would have been about August of 23, and until the time that we were actually looking at crafting the plan in 2024, as I recall, there was about 2,100 megawatts of additional demand that had been needed as a result of, decisions that were being made. It might have been low growth that was contributable to data centers. It might have been economic development decisions that were contributing to that. But how do you provide the adequate power that will be needed longer term in North Carolina, and what's the mix of generating facilities to do it? In 2022, we allowed about $75 million that could be spent on early site permitting for nuclear facilities. In the last carbon plan, we looked at providing another $365 million that could be used toward development of those facilities. Closing down, say, coal generating facilities at Blues Creek in North Carolina, putting in small modular reactors there. We're looking at putting in one by 2034, an additional one by 2035. And carbon reduction can be accomplished if we optimize how we're doing it. We're looking at offshore wind, we're looking at onshore wind. And of course, the solar is naturally a part of that equation. But right now in North Carolina, and I will say within the Carolinas, about 56% of the energy that's generated comes from nuclear. And in terms of the clean energy in our state, about 86% is nuclear today. So we're looking at that base load capacity that we have to provide so that energy is provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, notwithstanding whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. Because one of the challenges with renewables is that they're intermittent, and you have to make certain that if you're closing down coal, what's going to be available 24/7 to do that. We're also looking at natural gas and how that might be done. And when we're looking at natural gas, we're looking at natural gas units that can be converted to use 100% hydrogen at some point in the future. That, again, will be 100% clean energy.
So how does this plan then evolve over time here? What's for the folks that don't follow as close?
Every 2 years, we're going to be sitting here reevaluating this. We have a plan or application that will be coming in this year that we'll be working upon. And again, we'll be re-examining the targets that we've set in the past. That 70% reduction target that we have talked about, there's legislation now to perhaps eliminate that interim target and just stick with the 2050 target for getting to net zero. I think that's Senate Bill 261. And also that bill includes language about construction work in progress so that you could pay for, say, nuclear as it was being constructed rather than waiting until facilities are completely built and then in that particular electric generating facility is used and useful, as we call it, in the utility sector.
Okay, let's bring in the rest of the panel. Mike Hager, principal owner of Hager Strategic Solutions, former North Carolina House of Representatives Majority Leader. That's where I know you from largely. Maureen Quinlan is Senior Officer, Clean Grid and Energy, the Pure Charitable Trust. And John Larson is Director of Public Policy and Economic Development for Dominion Energy. Good to see all three of you. Thank you for being here as well. There seems to be this tension between rising energy costs as new infrastructure investments are being made and meeting our carbon emission goals. What do you think is the best strategy to meet the goals while also addressing cost and environmental goals? Mike, we'll start with you.
Well, Tim, I think we're kind of staying at a crossroads right now. If you look at the landscape and take the issues that I dealt with as a legislator and project them now, they're so different now than what they were when we were there. I'm glad to see a lawyer like Senator McKissick start talking energy language. It's heartening to see that. But I think we have to have diversity. Number one, we've got to have a diversity of our mix. As Senator McKissick said, Commissioner McKissick, I apologize, has said that the sun doesn't always shine, but if you pair that with battery capacity, it does. It can. And the wind doesn't always blow, but if you pair that with batteries, it can. So we need diversity between a spinning reserve of dispatchable energy and renewables, but pairing them with battery power. If you look at the cost of nuclear, which new nuclear probably will take 10 to 20 years to come online. I think that's kind of the last things I've seen. And if you look at what we're going to need in the next 5 years, if we want to be a player in AI, for instance, you're talking probably needing about 4 to 5 gigawatts of power in the next 5 to 10 years. And that gives you a handful, a little bit less than 10 hyper data centers. Now, where's that going to come from, and how do we get that? How do we do that initially? And it's going to be with diversification. But we can't miss also grid security and nuclear security and generation security. And we have to give Duke Energy and independent power producers, the IOUs, independent power producers, the ability, the legislative landscape to go out there and permit what they need. We heard that earlier. So I think the mix is going to kind of contend on where we develop, whether it's in commercial, industrial, or data centers.
What do you think about the challenges politically in trying to make all of this happen? Because even within the Republican Party, there is difference of opinions about renewables, for instance. How does this all work out politically, do you think?
You know, again, different landscape when I was there, but the guys I talk to now, I think renewables have kind of softened a little bit. And when I say softened, that with the Republicans, they're willing to accept them a little more, because I think they do place, they have a part to play in that triad we were talking about in nuclear, combustion turbines, and renewables. So I think they're seeing it as, yes, there's a part for them in there. And if you look at the numbers, the cost isn't that much greater, if any greater at all. We even paired with batteries than say a new nuclear coming on. It's a little bit more than combustion turbines coming on. Would be a little bit more than that, but it is part of that, and I think the Republicans are starting to see that.
Maureen, same original question to you about balancing the goals with cost and environmental goals as well.
Sure, and maybe a little bit of background. The Pew Charitable Trust is a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy organization that uses data to help states meet challenges in a changing world. The Energy Modernization Project, where I work, works primarily on energy issues and helping states kind of chart through some challenges around our evolving, modernizing of the grid. So I agree. I think diversity is an incredibly important element here. Ensuring that the state has diversity of clean energy resources that it can leverage while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and meeting this increasing demand. Things like solar and batteries and offshore wind that have complementary generation profiles. As we know, being able to close the gap and meet this increasing demand is critical for the state to be able to unlock American energy abundance and continue its strong economy. I think one opportunity and approach that North Carolina could lean in on to meet these challenges is increasing deployment of distributed energy resources. So these are resources like solar, rooftop solar, energy storage, even electric vehicles, which are essentially batteries on wheels, and other smart technologies that can help consumers reduce their energy use when demand is high. So these sort of DERs, as they're called, have many benefits. You may have heard some of them already today, but they are very easily deployed quickly. They are a cost-effective approach to decarbonization. Studies have shown that incorporating DERs along with large-scale renewables actually reduces the cost of meeting clean energy goals. One study from a group called Vibrant Clean Energy showed that consumers nationwide would save about $109 billion by taking a DER plus large-scale renewable approach to decarbonization. So there are real cost savings there. And it also provides more resilience. So Governor Stein talked about in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, the microgrid that Duke Energy operates in Hot Springs, and the ability for these behind-the-meter resources, these resources that generate and store energy closer to where they're used, can provide essentially backup power when the broader grid goes down. So those are sort of benefits that consumers can see and really puts customers and consumers and communities in the driver's seat in terms of their energy future. So we're seeing a growing interest from states in really deploying more distributed energy at a scale that is at the same scale as large power plants. So Duke Energy has a program, Power Pair program, at a pilot stage they're looking to expand. And we're seeing states across the country and utilities like Xcel in Minnesota proposing hundreds of megawatts of distributed energy as part of their future resource plans. So while North Carolina ranks, I think, currently 4th in terms of large-scale solar deployment, we're actually pretty low on the list of state rankings in terms of distributed energy. So I think that's an opportunity area that we have in the state to lean in a bit more on DERs.
Do you think states are doing, he talked about AI and the immense amount of power it's needed. So then we're also talking about doing things for clean energy and the carbon plans. Are states doing enough? Are they prepared for all these changes while also trying to reduce carbon?
I think a lot of states are right now grappling with looking for tools in the toolbox and actively solving these problems, and North Carolina is one of them. I think the increased load from AI presents a great opportunity, but also that challenge of how do you meet demand in the near term. So I don't know that anyone has really cracked that nut yet. There's no silver bullet, but I think North Carolina is in good company in terms of being with a lot of other peer states, sort of looking at bringing all solutions to the table and using data and modeling and analytics to, and piloting to start figuring out what some of those solutions might look like.
Maybe John's got all the answers next, right?
Oh, perfect. Should have started with you, John.
How about your from perspective about balancing all this?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of start with a little bit of a framing perspective. Mike and I were talking as we were getting ready to come on stage. We both started NC State around the same time in the early 80s.
UNC Charlotte, the engineering
Oh,
school.
UNC Charlotte.
The engineering
All right.
school in North Carolina.
So, okay, we won't debate that, but I see what building we're in, what campus. But literally, the first thing I learned how to do with anything automated was a punch card, right? Those god-awful things, and you would have a tray of them. You have one card that had an error, and you had to start over, right? And, we came to school thinking, oh my gosh, we're in the height of the industrial society. We're going to make it better and stronger and just continue to grow as a nation. And we certainly learned those things and started our careers, but now we're in a technology revolution, right? We are making a tremendous step forward. So my iPhone, using the cloud, has more computational power and more storage than the first PC the Chem E department here at NC State had. It had like 20 meg of storage, and only grad students were allowed to touch it, right? So as an undergrad, like, ooh, we got to see it one time. But, as you look at that, think about it. Your chat GTP search uses 2.9 watt hours of energy. Your original Google search used 0.3, so you're at 10x the energy just when you use your phone and that chat GTP answer comes up. All right, so, what are we seeing here as we find ourselves in this technology revolution? So to share a little bit in Virginia, 126 years to get to 26,000 megawatts as a peak load. We will more than double that in the next 12 years. So how do you get there? It's going to take a lot of investment. And I think you can look at the least cost scenario is going to require substantial investment. And the way we're looking to address these issues, and I certainly have no problem with borrowing Governor Youngkin's phrase of all of the above approach, right? So as you look at the investments that are going to be required for generation, transmission, distribution, and then how our customers use energy, it is going to encompass everything. And there's some real benefits that can come with that. I'm going to share one. Winter Storm Elliott, 2 years ago on Christmas Eve, we had a cold snap that lasted longer in duration and had colder temperatures than we expected for the Mid-Atlantic region. Had the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project, 176 turbines producing 2.6 gigawatts of energy been operational, it would have saved $10 million just on Christmas Eve. We've now gone and looked at what that would have saved over that entire stretch, and it's over $40 million in fuel costs. So you can see that there's trade-offs as we go forward. Certainly, we're going to need on-demand generation resources, but there's some real benefits to having that broadly diverse portfolio as we go forward. So making those investments and keeping that all above the approach is a way to get there.
So balance that with costs. Me as a consumer, I hear that significant investment, and I start thinking, oh, great, what's my bill going to go to? How do you balance that? What does this mean for consumers?
Well, I think when you start looking at it, CVAL just in the first 10 years can save over $3 billion of fuel costs for our customers. That's significant, and that's looking at a fundamental fuel cost. If we continue to have these higher prices and volatility, it will far exceed that. So we try to look at how do you do it? And also do we have to build a new generation asset? We're partnering with other utilities to look at bringing new transmission lines to move power from areas that have additional generation resources. And we're stepping up and increasing those so we could bring 3 times the amount of energy to an area and bring that in from other areas that may have generation that wouldn't require us to build as much. So we take the approach of looking at what is the most cost-effective way to reliably serve our customers in an affordable way and an increasingly clean portfolio.
Do you want to jump in, Mike?
Yeah, and, listen to the panel here, very, very well put, but the legislative piece of it has not really been talked about that much. I'll give you a good example. the speed of which we're going to have to build 4 to 5 gigawatts of power is going to be great, like we've probably never done before. And there's so many regulations we have in place to keep us from siting, a transformer or siting a unit. As a good example, a lot of counties in the state have moratoriums on large solar projects, for instance. And you can't site a large solar project in some of these counties over, I think it's 100 acres or less. So that's going to be a detriment to us getting the 4 to 5 gigawatts we need, and we have to remove those barriers for not just the independent utilities like Duke Energy IOUs, but the IPPs also, the independent power producer, investor-owned, and then the independent power producers, removing those not just for solar, but for gas turbines that somebody wants to come in and build, removing those constraints in these counties that they need to be built in. So that's going to be a fight we're going to have, the legislature's going to have, the legislature's going to have in the next few years to solve those issues and clear up some of those environmental issues also, to build these large-scale solar facilities or to build these large-scale combustion turbines or to start siting a nuclear facility. That regulatory piece is going to be the toughest piece, I think.
Commissioner, to the extent that you can, talk about this weighing cost versus what you're trying to do.
Well, I mean, we are supposed to choose the least cost means of generating electricity. I mean, that's what we're required to do. I know when the discussion moves to nuclear frequently, I mean, the question is it a least cost? Is it least cost resource? And they're talking about moving to perhaps looking at best value in terms of what you might look at, because those facilities could run for 80 years. And right now they're looking at, for existing electric generating fleet here in the Carolinas. I think Duke has about 11 nuclear generators at 6 different sites, and they're looking at subsequent license renewals to make sure that they are extended in the capacity of using them going out beyond 2050. So, how do you accomplish coming up with generation mix with least cost in the environment that we are today? There's certainly great concern about how we get all the solar onto the grid that we'd like to. In 951, there was a requirement that 45% of the solar being produced would come from private providers through private purchase agreements, and 55% would be utility scale. But as Representative Hager, I'm going to still call you Representative, we worked together a lot back when we were both in the General Assembly, stated, it's challenging today in some of the rural counties to go in there and site large-scale facilities. So, I mean, I think we are able to do it, but the question is, will we be able to accomplish it in a way that minimizes cost to ratepayers? There will be additional costs associated with moving to the type of generating fleet that we need. But there's also discussion about what we can do in terms of minimizing the impact upon those that have the greatest energy burden in terms of the bills that are more challenging to pay for people who basically need assistance. And we've come up with some customer assistance programs that will address that. There's a pilot right now where if you qualify for LIHEAP, which is a federal program, or SIP, you can get a $42 a month bill credit. So that minimizes the impact for those that have the greatest energy burden, but it's a very challenging thing to do. And I think from what I was reading, just in the month of April alone, Duke closed contracts for close to 1 gigawatt of additional demand, a lot of it from these data centers, those type of facilities. But can we do it? It's going to be a challenge. Will we accomplish it? I believe that we will, but trying to do so will be increasingly complex, and it's coming up, again, as I say, it's an all-of-above strategy in terms of that electrical generation that we have to come up with to provide the capacity that's going to be needed, but doing it in a way that is least cost unless that language is statutorily changed.
Maureen, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that are in the way of reaching all of these goals and how we might overcome them?
Yeah, great question. I think John touched on it well. It's not just thinking about the generation piece. How do we create enough electricity to meet this demand? How do we make sure we have a transmission grid that is robust enough and has enough capacity to actually move all of the electricity to where it needs to go? So yeah, talking about the challenges in building, that's not just for generation, but also for transmission. So I think if you look back to the early 2010s, as a nation, we were building something like 1,500 miles of transmission each year. I think the last year I saw data for 2023, we built 55 miles. So it's been declining every year now for over a decade. And that's a big challenge now when you need to make sure that you can serve all of these customers and move the electricity from large offshore wind farms to load centers. So one of the areas that my team at Pew has been working with a lot of state policymakers on is what are some near-term solutions to this transmission challenge? We know we need more high voltage transmission. We know it's going to take 7, 10 years to build. What can we do in the near term to try to alleviate some of these bottlenecks and some of these constraints? And so we've seen a real increasing interest from states in encouraging more investments in advanced transmission technologies, which is a suite of hardware and software solutions that essentially allow you to squeeze more out of the grid we already have. So by deploying these technologies on the existing grid, you can increase the capacity or sort of throughput of electricity that can flow through those lines, depending on the technology, anywhere from a 10% increase to a 110% increase. They're very cost effective. They can pay for themselves in months or years. They can be deployed in weeks to months. So this is sort of a bridge solution that a lot of state policymakers are looking for to sort of get us to that longer term, bigger transmission project. So I think transmission is a big challenge to being able to build out these clean energy resources, and so that's an area where we're seeing some real innovative solutions to try to get us there.
John, I was reading about Axios seems to every day they're obsessed with AI right now. Every day it's like the top of the thing. It's fascinating, but the one this morning was really fascinating because one of the guys that was heavily involved in this is saying, like, we're not looking at this fast enough, like the next couple of years. So the transmission stuff, as anyone knows that follows government, nothing happens fast, particularly with energy and building infrastructure. Is there gonna be a gap, or how is this gonna work?
So
beyond just even AI, obviously.
Yeah.
Piece of it.
So when you look at it, think about the electric system. It is a complex and dynamic machine, if you will, right? And there's some challenges as we look at this, right? Some of the reflexive reactions to the fact that we will need some on-demand generating resources, or that a certain program or technology is the single silver bullet. There's not a single piece. The philosophical differences of a utility that we're required to serve our customers, and other groups, that NGOs, stakeholders, that may have different views or deregulation proponents that aren't required and don't have those obligations of a utility. So as we kind of shape all of that, taking and reaching out and doing stakeholder engagement and communicating is extremely important so that we can work together to figure out a path forward to meet the needs of all of our customers, whether it's someone that's in a public housing facility to a data center, right? One end of the spectrum of our customers to the other. So it's working to make sure we can accommodate those needs. Can it be done? I believe it will be done. America as a country has a great history of being able to meet the needs that come before it. Is it going to be hard? Is it going to be complex? Will there be a lot of hard decisions that have to get made? Yes. But we can invest in technologies. We can invest in how to be the most efficient in building and transmitting that energy. Make sure that we adopt technologies that make that more efficient, working with our customers on how to better use it. The one thing I will say that as we keep doing this, and maybe this is the engineer coming out of me, physics actually does matter, right? So, that apple fell and hit Newton in the head. Well, physics dictates how the grid works. And we have to take into account all of those dynamics as we go forward to make sure that we can have reliable and affordable energy as we go through this clean energy transition. And you can do it. It's just a lot of work. And building strong networks, whether it be socially and with stakeholders or with the actual assets that we have.
And Mike, you talked about the politics of this some. You know, some people think about this as their own chat GPT, where they're going to power in their house. But this is really, the states that figure this out are going to have a significant advantage with economic development, right?
Yep, it really is. And I will say that I think under the current regulatory landscape we have, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to go where we need to go in the next 5 to 10 years. So our legislators have to be more innovative, I think, and give these guys more tools to use to help get us where we need to be. But you're right. I mean, it's not just AI. It's the robotic companies coming in. We have battery manufacturers coming in now. So all these intensive voltage, current, frequency users that we're having. You know, as the engineer there knows, three pieces there. You got to make sure your voltage is good. You got to make sure your frequency's on par. You got to make sure your current's flowing. Any of those 3 things can shut down large grids. So we've got to be careful of that. Not just building it, it has to be built in the right place. It has to have the right voltage that we can send down the line. It has to have the right frequency we can keep within a certain parameters. So it's very complicated, and we've got to kind of handle it on the regulatory side first, I believe.
And Commissioner, I don't know if you guys feel a sense of urgency or not, but you're bound by statutes and rules that you got to follow time-wise too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes it exceptionally challenging. When you look at the large load growth that's occurring today from the data centers and all the heavy users of power, we have to make certain that when that power is needed, whether it's 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, notwithstanding other factors, that it is there. People don't want to get up in the morning and not have the capacity to turn on the light switches and have power. So how do we accomplish that? How do we build that capacity? How do we make the strategic investments that are necessary to provide that power for the exceptional growth that is occurring here in North Carolina? And we're going to seeing exceedingly large increase in demand. I mean, you know, Virginia has the highest concentration of data centers of any place, not just the United States, but in the world. But we're starting to see a lot of that interest here in North Carolina. And if you think about those data centers, you think about these economic development decisions, you think about the whole motor vehicle fleet and how people are moving more toward electric vehicles. If you look at the growth coming in from inward migration in North Carolina, soon we'll be the 7th largest state by 2030 in the country. We have to have that capacity. If we make the strategic investments at the right time in the right sources, we'll have the capacity to do it. I'm confident that we can, notwithstanding the challenges, the complex web that we face in terms of regulatory environment, as well as getting those resources online when we need them at the time that they're going to need to be able to provide the power for those who are out there using it and consuming it.
Maureen, last question to you. Do you think there's a proper understanding of the challenges and how important this issue is? I feel like at least society, there's so many things going on. We take things for granted. When Hurricane Helene happened, people really learned quickly about you turn the tap on and they just think water's going to be there magically. And it takes a lot, right, to make sure it's clean and healthy and it's there. Is there a proper understanding, whether it's the general public or even policymakers?
Yeah, it depends on the who, right? And I spend a lot of time talking to policymakers, regulators, the general public, and NGOs. I think among policymakers, yes, and largely because of the increased data centers, people really seeing this is affecting my district. We have needs that need to be met, and I'm hearing from my constituents concerns about affordability and rates going up. I also have these companies who want to locate here. I have utilities telling me, you know, the math doesn't math. Like, how can we make this work in the timelines that these developers need? So I think amongst policymakers, increasingly, yes. And I think the general public also increasing. But, you know, to your point, most people's interaction with the energy system occurs when something has gone wrong, right? If we're doing our jobs well, no one has to think about it. It's frictionless. It just is there. It's reliable. So I think these increasing occurrences of natural disasters, you know, large weather events that create outages, I think that's really bringing to the forefront. People are starting to think more about energy as something that they might need to make more investments in or take more control of to have, you know, more backup generation. Even, you know, things making national news. I think, you know, the winter storms in Texas where they had, you know, blackouts for many, many days, that made national news. So even people here in North Carolina, like, that's on your radar. Hurricane Helene. So I think there is a bit of, as time goes on, if it's been a while since a big outage, it sort of fades to the background for people. But I do think there's a growing recognition of the importance of energy and just keeping society going. And I did want to share, your original question for this panel, that the premise is this conflict potential, this friction between affordability and clean energy. And there's a quote I think of from former FERC Chairman Willie Phillips when he was asked about the clean energy transition. He often says, if we can't do this affordably, we won't do this successfully. And I think that's really true, and how I think about this. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. We need to do this clean energy transition as quickly as possible. We also need to do it with affordability in mind and ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind and we're not increasing energy burdens for folks who are already struggling to pay their bills, and that's a tough challenge.
Okay, before I let you go, I think we have the poll results that we took earlier, asked about the poll. You should have gotten it to your device. There you go. What's your most important energy priority? We have a little bit of a dominant answer there. C, affordability versus clean energy. False choice. We can have both.
I have voted for C and mentally, so.
Well, you're part of the majority.
Wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our panel.
Good job. Absolutely. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm hearing a sense of urgency on the policy and regulation side if we're to realize our energy future. So thank you very much for sharing those perspectives.